Hi, folks. This is Alex Kareem Howard, and you are on the Series A Blueprint. And today I want to record a special episode with you guys where, since we're approaching the end of year, I want to reflect on some of the things I've seen with the startups I've worked this year and some core trends in the B2B software ecosystem, primarily based in Europe, but this probably applies to elsewhere as well. And these are probably trends that we're going to keep seeing in 2026. So it's retroactive, however, it also applies to the future. So if you're also in a state of reflection, looking back at the year, if you might listen to this during the break, I hope that this can trigger some thoughts around how you're actually building products inside of your startup and how you might be more capital efficient and increase your probability of success of raising a good round in time coming soon. So the first thing, which has been the most recurrent theme this year that I think differentiates good product founders from the rest, is that good product founders speak in outcomes first and foremost. What does that concretely mean? That means that they are, on the one hand, speaking about metrics and targets that they are going to reach when it comes to readiness for fundraising for their next round. So most of the startups I work with, they're aiming towards seed or Series A. And let's say if they run out of money by June, well, by the end of March, they're aiming to be Series A ready. They give themselves a 3 to, let's say 6-month buffer if they're really conservative. And the entire team knows this. The entire team knows in their sleep that their revenue has to go to 500K, or that their retention needs to go up, or, whatever the case may be. They are clearly communicating that to their team. Generally, the architecture I also see inside of teams is that, so you have this kind of fundraising round level, so that could be 6 months away, 12 months away. But that also ties to what I've implemented with a lot of startups pre-Series A, which is to work in 6-week iterations for product. So what you'll find is that, the classical OKR model looks at, every 3 months. And obviously, the more uncertainty you have, the more short your cycles and iterations you're going to have to look at. So my recommendation would be, like, if you're pre-seed, and of course, all seed companies are not equal, but if you are before seed, having raised the seed round and having already raised the pre-seed round, I would really look at 6-week iterations. I would even look at that architecture, that operational architecture for you pre-Series A, potentially. It all depends how quickly the winds sway and how quickly the direction can change. Like, if you're a business like Lovable, you're probably not looking at quarterly goals. You're probably looking at shorter iterations, just because you just do not know what the world would look like in 3 months. So yeah, adapt the length of your iteration cycles to the uncertainty of your business. I think that's one. So 6-week objectives, these objectives tend to be outcomes, definitely not a checklist or deliverable. So not ship this feature or build the auth tool to enable multiple users, or this would really have to be how has the world changed because of what you're doing, not what are you doing. That is how you decide what a good objective is, right? It's the downstream outcome that you're looking to influence. So something about objectives is always indirect. You are then taking bets on how you're going to change your personal world to tip in the direction of that outcome. So let's say you want net retention of users to go up to 90%, even though your baseline right now is 80%, let's say 7-day retention, right? You don't know how you're going to do that. You have hypotheses and assumptions, and you're circulating within your team ideas around what is the best way, what is the most capital efficient way to achieve this outcome. And I think as a founder, you need to be kind of slightly obsessive about this question. And you need to instill that mindset in your teams that they should be asking that question all the time, right? You're kicking off a sprint and you're building these features. You want to have built a product culture where you're lead backend engineer might be like, hold up, I know a cheaper way to do this. You want to increase retention from 80 to 90%? I know a lot about users, and I know that what we're building is going to be very expensive. And I know that there's another way that's likely to impact them because I know about them. I know you've given me user feedback. You've given me the context for me as a backend engineer to actually challenge what you're proposing. And I think this leads me on to my second point here, which is that good founders build creative sandboxes. So I've written an article about this on my Substack. You can check it out. It's at regenerativeproducts.substack.com. And I put forth the idea of creating creative sandboxes for your employees. So, imagine a sandbox, right? Like you put your kid in there, they're a baby, you're giving them limits and they can play within those limits. They can build castles, they can build, whatever it is, rivers. I don't know if y'all remember your sandbox days as children, but basically there is something to it that is fun because you're giving creative autonomy to your team members because they are in the weeds and they make the best micro investment decisions around how to create impact. So, you're the CEO of your startup, you set the direction, but at the end of the day, your front-end engineer is going to decide writing this line of code is going to create a return, right? So you're creating an environment where your front-end engineer needs to make an informed investment decision about their time that is optimal. I don't know if this is starting to make sense for you guys, but the question is, how do you create a framework where each team member can assess whether they are being productive with their time and they're actually contributing to the best possible way with their skill set and their knowledge and the network to the business? Because I've seen some startups, where the founder or the CEO is like negotiating every acceptance criteria, every edge case with their engineers. That certainly can be worth it. That can be an operating model that works. I think another is you are constantly distillating the essence of the domain knowledge that you're learning out there, the user feedback that you're gathering, and you're very clear on commuting outcomes, bringing it back to my previous point, so that engineers can be very good at determining how to get to an outcome, right? So one thing that I've been also seeing with the CEOs that I've been working with is as we work together, they're less in the how. By how, I mean, okay, create a chat interface that allows you to query your data analytics versus I want my users to have more granular insights around their data on our platform, right? And as I work with founders, they tend to extract themselves from the hows and they tend to communicate and crystallize the outcome and define the boundaries of the creative sandboxes that they're defining for their teams better. So you're shaping the environment for your team members to be higher value contributors, founder like team members, in order for the overall value of the business to go up. I mean, especially with large language model type tools, the impact that team members can have is more outsized, right? Like with coding assistants, I can write more lines of code as an engineer. As a go-to-market manager, I can write more copy, more content. So the question is really like, how do I act like a more senior team member and not just someone that's executing, someone that's actually making strategic decisions around what I should be spending time on? So those are really the first 2 points. First one being outcome led. The second one, creating creative sandboxes for your teams. And I really think if you do those 2 things well as a founder, honestly, you're already in the 10%. And, you know, that 9 out of 10 startups fail. So that gives you a very higher chance of succeeding. I'm not saying this will guarantee that you will survive for the next 3 years, but it substantially increases the likelihood. And frankly, I very rarely speak to founders before working with them and they have that they have that going and executing this well already. So I think if you spend some time thinking about this, you can considerably increase the capital efficiency of your startup. Now, number 3 is a little harder to nail, but I had a conversation with a VC this year who told me, why the hell would we hire you? Why do you have to why would you have to advise founders? If they're not good at product already, then we wouldn't invest in them. And my answer to that comment is yes, founders have insane product intuition and insane product sense. Like they intuitively have an understanding of like, okay, this might work, this might not work, and their intuition is above average, definitely. However, the art is in scaling your intuition, testing your intuition, verifying your intuition, propagating this intuition to other team members. So, you're not the king with 1,000 soldiers that are just executing on what you're doing. You want vision to be decentralized. So anyway, what does this concretely mean? This means that over time, what you want to be doing as a founder is you want to be preserving your mental bandwidth and you want to be systemizing your intuition. And how do you preserve mental bandwidth? There are many ways to do this, but I think the main way that I've seen, and I've had this conversation with many founders this year, actually really interesting, and it really resonated with a lot of people. So that's why I'm sharing this here. Is the question is, how do you make decisions? And when you make a decision, do you go deep enough into the data, into the variables, make a decision, and then move the hell on? Because what I see with a lot of founders is that they kind of make a decision, but then they don't turn the page on that. They kind of say, okay, today the wind's blowing this direction. So I think the answer to this question is X. But then when the tide turns in 2 weeks, then the answer becomes Y. Let me give you a concrete example. If a founder wants to solve greater intelligence nuggets surfacing about their data for their users, the answer to a question might be the way to do this is to build a chat interface, or maybe the alternative is to build more graphs, right? Or more UX views, right? Now, what I see with a lot of founders is they have a fairly good intuition around what the best solution is. Founders don't really get to the bottom of things around all the variables that would help them make that decision so that they could be actually certain and close the case. And then be like, you know what? We've interviewed 5 users on this. We've actually tested our prototype with 3 users. We've checked the data. We've checked the competition. We've checked, whatever precedents. We're building the chat and that case is closed. I'm not looking at this again. Unless in 3 to 6 months, something drastic changes or the data proves that adoption sucks and that it's not working and that we have to rethink. Perhaps it's an execution problem or it's the whole thing was the wrong way to go problem. You can see how in the second scenario that I've just presented to you, you put the case to rest and the founder doesn't sort of wake up at 2 a.m. and is like, fuck, I should have built a dashboard, not the chat, right? You see how having a good intuition and staying on the intuitive level can be a trap because you're actually not resting the case on your intuition and you're not building systems to actually check whether you're actually right or wrong because you're going to be wrong half of the time. Let me tell you that no matter how good your product sense is, you want to have a scientist's mindset and say, let's find empirical evidence or whatever, data evidence or testimonies or whatever the case may be, data from the market that signals, right, that tell us that we're right or not. So I think if your sense is that there's a lot on your mind and you're juggling a lot, then I'd love to push you to make your decisions differently so you can rest your case and you can really focus on one thing at a time. Because even as a founder, you want to minimize your multitasking. And I know that this is very hard to do as a founder because you're basically the shit umbrella for everyone else and you're going to context switch like crazy. But rest as many cases as you can and use systems and processes that you can trust so that you don't have 26,000 tabs open, because, that's also a mental health concern, right? Like, this affects founder mental health as well. I mean, if you have a lot of tabs open, you are just not as effective and you don't give your full attention to the most important problem that surfaces, right? I mean, because this is what you need to do. What is the most important problem right now, and how do I solve it? And then moving on to the next one, moving on to the next one. So these are my 3 nuggets really for you: being outcome led, building creative sandboxes, and building systems that scale your intuition. And if you work on those in 2026 and you really change you can call this a product operating model, product culture, how you run your operations, leadership style, whatever the case may be. You can give it many different names. But I think if you really start to reflect on how you are building products, how you are building your organization, how you are managing your team, you will have a greater impact on return than if you're working on the product directly and making decisions like, shit, we should have built this, we should have built that. Reflect on how you are doing things, and you will have an outsized influence on the product and on the organizations, and you will significantly increase the likelihood of closing that next round. This is the Series A Blueprint, and I'm Alex Kareem Howard. Thanks for listening. Are you an early stage founder and you want to go deeper into the product craft and you feel inspired by the topics that we're discussing on this show? You can reach out to me on the links in the show notes, and we can have a discussion and go deeper into your product problems. I'd be happy to chat. Just reach out. All right, thanks for the show, and don't forget to subscribe, folks. See you next time.